So thanks, Tim, so much for talking about the culture. That was really beneficial, and I think would help a lot of people. Once you got that in place, you were really in a spot where you could start to analyze and understand areas for improvement in your warehouse, in your supply chain. So if you could maybe talk to I guess the journey around that, how you thought about the issues, how you identified those, how you prioritize those, and maybe give us several examples, because I know you did a lot of stuff, right? And it really had powerful impacts over and above, just natural attrition, to where you now have about 60% of the workforce that you started with, and bringing down the material handling equipment from 17 to 9, which is already in itself an enormous benefit from a WMS. But then you started to actually squeeze the juice out of the system, right?
Yep.
So please tell us all about that.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. So I think that the main thing was the once we had stabilized, I think that gave us some time to breathe and some time to think. It also gave you weekends back, which got the oxygen flowing in the brain. I think at that time, right in the beginning of, I'm sure you'll probably remember this or recall this, was you sent me a lot of information because I was new to the business, and it was the first time I was seeing Manhattan scale. Is I asked you for a lot of stuff, and you sent me a lot of stuff. But I think it was too much for me to try and digest at that time. But I kept it all in a folder called Michael Badwi. And what I was able to do once we started to, and I don't have it anymore, sorry, Mike, is what we were able to do is start to then say, okay, let's start going through some of that information that Michael sent us right in the beginning. One of the first ones I saw, and it's definitely worthwhile mentioning because this helped us in our optimization journey. There was an article that talked to a Manhattan scale article that talked to benchmarking and benchmarking yourself against competitors. And for me, that rung true with me quite quickly, because I had made the statement quite bravely and probably naively to my bosses to say, I don't want this warehouse to be the best in South Africa. I would like to compare us or be the best in the world. And everyone probably thought this dude's on something special, man. But but that was truly my dream, and it became the dream of Tarsus. And so one of our engagements was to start building out these benchmarking dashboards. I'm sure you recall that. And that was an exciting time because we took some of this internationally published data and we broke that up into inbound inventory management, outbound metrics. It was metrics that talked to the utilization of our facility, the accuracy of the inventory. It was just an exciting thing, and we could watch stuff working and where we were lacking, where we were measuring against the best in the world, where we had an opportunity to really optimize. And that was, that was a big driver for us, as well as the fact that we would try and implement little things in the warehouse, like putting in smaller bin locations and really struggling in that. And so those were two of the big drivers for us, was stuff that we were doing operationally, as well as the benchmarking dashboards. I think those were the two game changers.
Yeah, and I think for anybody who's sitting there wondering what those benchmarks were, they came from the Warehouse Education and Research Council. So, www.werg.org. So that's where they came from.
Yeah. And so that was a real game changer, as I say. One of the first things that we tried to do is one of the inventory team said to me, they're really struggling with pig faces. We don't have enough pig faces. We've got reserve in abundance. We don't have pig faces. So we started walking around the warehouse and had a look. And one of the observations for me was you had these small products sitting in really big bin locations. So to cut a long story short, is we then we thought we would create some fine pick locations, some really small fine picks. And then we had to suddenly come up with a new naming convention, because the old naming convention wasn't flexible enough and didn't allow us to be able to simply create new pig faces. So that was a big one. And what that translated into was a 10-week project working with SCJ. Every day we would complete our work in the warehouse. We would then work after hours with a team of SCJ people, facilities people. We would remove every label off every beam in the warehouse on the racking. That's after having modularized the racking as well, as actually getting all the beams to the same level. At that point, we reduced from 46 bin location types down to 11. So it was a major change, and the whole warehouse became modular then. So like I said, we would finish our work, we would switch off a couple of rows or a zone. We would replace all the labels, taking old labels off, new labels on, run scripts with SCJ to update the bin location from the original to the new. And then the next day, during the working day, we would have the inventory team doing cycle counts to go and double check all of that inventory. And that was a 10-week process, but that was an absolute major. And that went hand in hand with the zoning. It went hand in hand with an increased view of, or more critical view of how we were doing master data. So those all went hand in hand, because later, what that master data translated into was the ability to quite seamlessly put in a conveyor belt system to start doing a handover to the courier. So we started then looking at saying, okay, if you're a picker, and this is another example, is if you're a picker, how much of your day are you spending walking? How much are you spending picking? That was another huge one for us. We then did a time and motion study and saw that pickers were walking 60 or 70% of their day. And the picking was like a really small portion of what they did. So what we did is we did an investigation then with the SCJ team to say, how do we understand this pick path? How do we geolocate a picker throughout this process? And so what we did is we took 11 picks and we mapped it in the system as it was then. And we really got this bowl of spaghetti. So we went on the journey of saying, how should this pick path look? And we redesigned that with the SCJ team, and we were able to re-script that. And suddenly we reduced that walking time to 30%. It was just a huge game changer. And if you see the picture of it, and maybe Mike, we could put that picture as one of an attachment somewhere within this presentation. But it's just, I mean, just one picture tells an entire story on that. That was an incredible time. So we started measuring the performance of different people within the place. So we started saying, if you're a GRV clerk, or if you're involved in staging, if you're an MHT driver and you do putaways, what is your accuracy rate? What is your number of putaways or GRVs you're doing per day? How many picks are you doing a day? And that became really exciting because the guys could see themselves, and they could see themselves on the scoreboard. So we continued with the soccer analogy as well. I mean, so you could see there's this mix of system, people, process all the time. And we carried on with that soccer analogy, but now it became the PSL table, and either you were in the standing for Champions League, or you were in the relegation zone. And the guys didn't want to be in the relegation zone. So those are the some of the optimizations we did. But I think another big one that we worked on, also worth mentioning, Michael, was the fact that we did 51% of our picks were a single line item, were a quantity of one. And we worked quite hard with you on that. And what we were able to do is create a single line picking ability within the system. And so what that meant is that, well, if I put that into metrics for you, is in the beginning, the guys were struggling to pick around 110 orders each a day. Once we had done the configuration of the single line picking, we put one of the top pickers onto picking 100 orders, single line orders, and he picked those in an hour. So you went from 110 orders in a day to being able to pick 100 in an hour. Absolute game changer. And that's translated through to where we are now because of what we've created, which we'll talk to later in this process. But what we've created now talks right back to that process. It was almost like that was, we could see the future by putting that in.
No, that's amazing, Tim. So, yeah, I mean, I'm not sure if there's any other optimization initiatives you want to share, because I know there's a lot. If there is, please go for it. If not, at the end we're going to give you your contact details so people can reach out to you anyway. So
yeah. So for me, I think that the other big optimization, Mark, was that conveyor belt. I talked to that earlier, but that was a major one. What that meant is that we needed to then integrate with couriers. So for every time you create a wave, in order to create the work for the warehouse, you're creating work for the MHEs, you're creating work for pickers, you're creating a theoretical message to the conveyor belt systems, you're creating a theoretical expectation for the couriers. Once the products then move through the pick cycle, the quality control cycle, the invoicing, which was also something that had to change during this process, and through the conveyor belts, then updates all of those systems again from you were expecting theoretical of X, Y, and Z, you now have actual of X, Y, and Z. So all of that is updating itself all the time through that process, and it's in line. So it's weighing it in line and it's updating in line. During that process, I mean, it was a major process. For South Africans, we called that OBS, which was outbound streamlining. OBS is obviously a fantastic drink in the winter times in South Africa. But so OBS became a long project, and it was probably 6 months of hard work. There was some nice capital investment from the company, which we were really grateful for. But just changed the dynamic again. And what it then helped us do again is, for the third time, it gave us a different view of how we should be looking at master data again. So we thought at that time that we were so experienced and no one could tell us anything about master data, but it wasn't the fact. Just putting in something like a conveyor belt now then suddenly changes your perspective again. And I wouldn't have thought so. I really wouldn't have thought so. And so now when I walk people through our facility, when I explain the master data creation process, I always describe it as the oxygen for the facility, and it is, because without that you don't have anything. You absolutely don't have anything. Whether it's the box you're picking into, the tote you're picking into, whether it's the placement of the product in the warehouse or how it goes, whether it's a conveyable or non-conveyable product, how it flows, which courier it goes to, that all comes from the master data creation and the mix of the products that are going into an order. So that was a huge one. With the MHEs, we are glad to tell you that we're actually dropped by another 2 now, so we're down to 7 MHEs now, and still on that journey. That's the optimization journey can't end. I think that's a really important one for us to talk to.
So I mean, it's interesting. You've dropped another 2 MHEs. How many orders have you increased through the facility?
Yeah, so we can talk to that maybe with the about what we've done, what we're doing now. But we've increased. So obviously through this COVID period, we've dropped off in the traditional space slightly. But what we've seen is a massive increase in the e-commerce platforms that we're running now. So I'd say we're probably 50% up on the orders that we used to be doing in this current time. If we hadn't had that, we would probably be at 100% of what we were doing prior, or 200%.
Yeah, so it's pretty amazing, really. So thank you, Tim, for sharing some of that information around optimization. I think there's a lot of learnings and benefits that you and the team have worked through and really achieved some amazing results. So thank you again.
Thank you, Mark.